Hey everyone, happy Tuesday and welcome to Meteorological Spring, which starts on March 1st. So on Sunday, we started Meteorological Spring, Astronomical Spring. This doesn't start until the 20th of this month, but Meteorological Spring starts March 1st. The first of the month every quarter are the meteorological seasons as we see it. As we look into the forecast for this week and beyond, really it is going to be looking like spring weather as we look at some of just the overall hazards that NOAA is calling out in the next 3 to 7 days. There's a few things to call out, mainly across the South Plains and especially Texas. We're going to be talking about severe weather and potentially heavy rainfall, especially for the eastern half of the state. Some of that severe weather is going to get potentially pretty far north as we head to Friday. And then with a series of systems, especially across the northern U.S., with a very strong jet stream, we're going to be seeing the potential for some stronger downsloping winds, especially for the northern Rockies. Later this week and into this weekend and beyond that, as we look into next week, we're seeing multiple hazards, both for slight chances for hazards, both with wind and precipitation, but there is increasing trend of additional heavy precipitation with another significant trough moving across the west. And that's going to be sort of the theme of this forecast, really, is a lot of significant troughs digging into the west, lifting up, tapping into a lot of moisture that's going to be producing heavy rainfall, extending from Texas up into the Ohio River Valley. Could be talking about another round of heavy rain and potential flooding extending even up potentially into parts of the Northeast as we head into middle portions of next week. And as we kind of like lay out, what does the forecast look like? This is just one forecast over, let's say, the next 10 days. We're seeing very heavy precipitation across parts of the Pacific Northwest, so much needed precipitation, some snowfall for high elevations of the Cascades, some snowfall for the northern Rockies as well. And then we see really heavy precipitation extending, as we talked about, from much of Texas up through the Ohio River Valley and out into the Northeast. Not any major winter storms per se on the horizon. We will be seeing some rounds of snow, especially Friday for parts of Minnesota. And really for the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the Northeast, we will be seeing on and off periods of some mixed precipitation, including snow, especially the farther north you go. But really the main message is going to be warmer weather and heavier precipitation for much of the central and eastern U.S. Unfortunately, areas that really need rain, like parts of the high plains, are not going to be getting that. So we'll see some continued fire weather concerns out there as well. So if we sort of just break down what the severe weather outlook looks like from the Storm Prediction Center, we get these sort of categorical risk levels. So on a risk from 1 to 5, what that looks like, marginal risk, or 1 out of 5 today across parts of the Southern Plains and in Missouri. We also see that the Storm Prediction Center breaks us out into the different hazard types. So tornado, wind, and hail. And we see that mainly the threat today is some marginal to potentially significant or severe, not significant, hail across parts of the South Plains. And then tomorrow, we see this slight chance, a risk 2 out of 5 for areas extending further to the south and further to the east, across the mid-Mississippi River Valley down into Texas. Slight chance of some tornadoes with that wind and hail, so sort of a general severe weather hazard. As we go into on Thursday, we're seeing continued chances. This backs a little bit further west, more into West Texas, and we're seeing this hatching, which indicates that severe weather that does happen could be more significant. So we could be talking about even higher wind gusts, even larger hail potentially, as the next trough begins to move out across the southern plains. That's going to sort of pull the dry line and more moisture further west into West Texas. And then it's looking like the big severe weather day right now is going to be as we head into Friday. So we're going to be seeing increased chances for severe weather, especially across the South Plains. And as that trough, an area of low pressure, lifts off to the northeast, we could be seeing severe weather getting as far north as parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin as some instability gets pretty far north, interacting with some very strong wind shear. Now, as we go back to the forecast, again, I'm looking at the GFS model. I really like to show this 500 millibars, mid-levels of the atmosphere. This is a few miles to maybe 5 miles above the ground. This helps us really diagnose where there are storm systems. A lot of these are associated with areas of low pressure and high pressure at the ground where we experience our weather, but it gives us a good sense of sort of where storm systems are at. So there's one right now that's bringing some wintry weather to the northeast. That's going to be lifting out here within the next 24 hours. There's another storm system that's going to be causing some of those chances for severe storms across portions of the mid-Mississippi River Valley, Southern Plains today, and more into tomorrow. So that's sort of storm system 1, 2, Third storm system digging into the Pacific Northwest now. That's going to be more of the significant weather maker, both for valley rain, mountain snow for parts of the Northwest and Intermountain West. And as that digs further and further south, we actually see that another trough comes in behind that. This main trough begins to lift out with that associated area of lower pressure as these areas of higher spin, higher vorticity, where we see these darker, richer colors, as they propagate and move, that creates what's called vorticity advection. And that differential vorticity advection helps to create rising motion, and that rising motion creates lower pressure at the ground. So this all sort of explains why we like looking as meteorologists at the mid levels of understanding what's going on. As that goes and lifts off to the northeast on Friday, this is a pretty classic setup for severe weather in the spring season with a strong shortwave trough. It's going to be tapping in some moisture, both from parts of the Pacific, but the Gulf as well. So that's going to have a lot of moisture to feed instability for storms, to feed heavy precipitation rates with potential heavy rain concerns Friday. And then as we go into this weekend, we see that things we see this very kind of tightly packed pattern to the north. So very strong jet stream to the north. This is going to be kind of a parade of storms. It's going to bring some potential strong winds to parts of the northern Rockies, and then sort of just on and off rounds for rain and potential wind free precipitation for the northern U.S. this weekend and into next week. The big question then as we go into next week is what happens with the evolution of this pretty significant trough that looks to close off and then retrograde a bit. You see when it starts to move west, we call that retrograding. Typically, all storm systems in some form or fashion tend to move from west to east when we talk about the typical jet stream type of dynamics. Tropical cyclones are sort of the opposite and behave differently. But when we talk about our typical mid-latitude storm systems, they tend to go from west to east. When they go from east to west, we call that retrograding. We see this trough move further west. It's eventually going to kick out at some point. It's gonna lift back up to the east as it phases up with some other trough on the northern polar jet here. When and where and how exactly this happens is going to play a pretty big indicator of the timing and severity and location of probably likely severe weather and heavy precipitation. It's just going to be when and where and exactly how severe. So still some uncertainty, but there is indications that by early mid next week, this trough lifts out. Again, strong differential vorticity advection that's going to be creating an area of low pressure. And as we look at one way to look at the amount of moisture this is going to be tapping into as well, we look at sort of how anomalous the amount of moisture advection is with this. We see a couple things. We see that over the next couple days, we see moisture coming out. Part of that's coming out of the Pacific, part of that's coming out of the Gulf. These darker green and blue colors indicate more moisture, which feeds the instability, which feeds the higher rainfall rates. Over the next few days, we see that lifting up with this area of low pressure. You see sort of the cyclonic rotation about the moisture field with this system in a Friday. And as we head to next week, this is really going to be tapping into some deep moisture out of the eastern Pacific. So that's why there's some flooding concerns with this, because the storm system is going to be sort of sitting there collecting moisture off of the eastern Pacific. It's going to pull some moisture out of the Gulf as well. And that's going to set up the stage for just multiple rounds of storms, potential severe weather. Not only what's happening the next 2 days, but then early to mid next week, could be seeing a multi-day severe weather event, could be seeing heavy rainfall. So we're going to be keeping a pretty close eye on that. That's why the Storm Prediction Center is calling out the next few days. We'll probably see as we get later this week more potential severe weather outlooks for next week. But I think another thing I wanted to call out too is it's going to be quite warm when we look at what are temperatures going to be for this time of year. What are the anomalies? We can see that most of the U.S. is quite warm. These red shadings indicate temperatures are above average for this time of year. We'll see that it's especially the case for the central and eastern U.S. Things get a little bit cooler out west with these troughs that are bringing more precipitation, more cloud cover, but really we could be looking at temperatures that are 20 plus degrees above average for parts of the U.S. later this week, into this weekend, including parts of Midwest, even into the Northeast. And it looks like that generally warm pattern is going to continue. What's different from the rest of this winter is we have this very zonal flow. We don't have this very amplified pattern. When we look, for example, at New York, which of course we know just had this significant snowfall event, foot or more of snow across much of the Northeast, generally kind of an above average snowfall winter. And we've seen that we have had some really cold periods across parts of New York, especially in early to mid-December. Things moderated a little bit, but then mid-January through mid-February was quite cold. It's been a little bit more moderate, but you can see that generally temperatures are within or below this gold color sort of average temperatures. And we can see on the ends of the blue and red where the maximum and record low temperatures are, and the blue graphs show what was the high temperature, what was the low temperature. So this gives a kind of a quick look at what temperatures were through the winter. And the reason I wanted to call that out was we just had all the snow. We've had a cold winter in New York, but we're already talking about potential temperatures. We look at one of the NOAA forecast tools. We're looking at high temperatures this weekend and next week, well into the 60s, potentially 70, which would be approaching near record temperatures. And one of the reasons I want to call is like, why are we seeing these warmer temperatures? Well, we're into meteorological spring now. When we look at a location like New York, when we think about going back to the winter solstice, this is sort of a view. These are just sort of fictitious buildings, but if we're looking south, we can look at what was the trajectory of the sun. What was the sun angle? And what we can see is that generally the sun angle is really low. In late December. It rises at a very low angle, gets up. You see that the shadows of the buildings are very long. There's just a much larger angle for solar radiation to travel through. So we don't heat up as much in the northern latitudes in winter. And our daylight is just over 9 hours. Fast forward to early March, where we are right now, and we're looking at daylight that's, approaching 11 and a half hours. So more daylight in general, but we also see that sun angle is getting noticeably higher. Again, if we go back just to January 1st and we fast forward to March, we see that the sun angle is higher in the sky. So it's more direct solar radiation coming in that allows us to warm up. So it's a combination of why is New York City, for example, in the Northeast going from so cold to so warm. It's a combination of the pattern finally changed. We have this much more zonal west to east that's keeping the colder air off to the north. And then we're also just seeing the fact that the sun angle is increasing as it does this time of year, giving us more sunlight, more direct sunlight that allows for warmer temperatures. Another thing I wanted to call out was while things were cold in the Northeast, meteorological winter was very warm across much of the western U.S., especially the Southwest. This is Salt Lake City. Again, the high and low temperatures, we see that generally this was above average pretty much all winter, a couple days approaching or breaking the all-time record. So totally different impact as we saw out east.